The piercing sound of the emergency siren jolted Leon Norwood awake from a deep sleep. His eyes snapped open, heart pounding as the flashing red lights bathed his small cabin quarters in an ominous glow. The intergalactic education exchange station wasn't supposed to have emergency drills during rest hours. "All human staff report to Medical Bay 4 immediately," announced the calm but urgent voice of Station Director Vrelex through the communication system. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Leon jumped from his bed, grabbing his uniform and pulling it on with practiced efficiency. As the station's only human biology teacher, emergency calls usually meant one thing: something had gone wrong with one of the alien students that the regular medical staff couldn't handle. The corridors were eerily empty as he sprinted toward Medical Bay 4, the specialized facility designed to handle the station's diverse range of species. 6 months into his 2-year teaching contract, Leon had grown accustomed to the occasional medical consultation, but the siren indicated something more serious. When the doors to the medical bay slid open, Leon was met with a scene of chaos. A group of Zentari students, tall, slender beings with iridescent blue skin and large, expressive eyes, were huddled around a medical table, making high-pitched keening sounds that Leon recognized as their expression of extreme distress. "Professor Norwood, thank the stars you're here," said Dr. Alex, the station's head physician. Her forearms moved rapidly, checking monitors while trying to calm the distressed students. "We have a situation with Malix." Leon pushed through the group of students to see a young Zentari lying on the examination table. Malix was one of his brightest biology students, always curious about human physiology. Now he was trembling, his normally bright blue skin dulled to a sickly gray. A deep gash ran across his forearm, leaking a thick, dark blue liquid. "What happened?" Leon asked, carefully examining the wound. One of the students, Trellis, stepped forward. "We were in the laboratory practicing dissection techniques on the synthetic specimens. Melix's cutting tool slipped." Her voice wavered, the translator struggling to convert her distress into human speech. "His life fluid is leaking out, Professor. He's going to dissolve from the inside." Leon quickly realized the source of the panic. In his xenobiology classes, he had taught them that human blood carries oxygen and nutrients throughout the body. The Zentari, however, had a very different circulatory system. Their equivalent of blood contained powerful enzymes that, if exposed to air for too long, could indeed become caustic to their own tissues. "Professor, we've applied the standard Zentari coagulants, but the wound isn't responding," Dr. Elix explained. "Their biology instructor is off station, and none of our medical staff are familiar enough with Zentari physiology to risk alternative treatments." The other students were now openly crying, their bodies vibrating in distress. "Please, Professor," pleaded Xenix, another of his students. "Malix's inner essence is exposed to the air. You know what happens next. The dissolving will begin." Leon thought quickly. Unlike the Zentari, humans had evolved on a planet with abundant water and oxygen. His mind raced back to his studies on comparative xenobiology. Zentari came from a world with minimal surface water, and their biochemistry had evolved accordingly. "I need a basin of clean, room-temperature water, now," Leon commanded. Dr. Alex looked at him with all 3 of her eyes widened. "Water? But Zentari biology." "Trust me," Leon interrupted. "Their enzymes are hyper-reactive to oxygen but stable in water. It will neutralize the catalytic reaction." A medical assistant quickly brought a basin of water. The Zentari students backed away, their cries intensifying. "No! Water burns!" shouted Trellis. "We learned in your class that water oxidizes and damages exposed tissue. For humans, water is healing," Leon explained calmly. "And for Zentari exposed enzymes. It will temporarily neutralize the reaction by displacing the oxygen. It won't hurt him." Malix looked at Leon with fear in his large eyes. "Professor, are you certain?" "I am," Leon reassured him. "Do you trust me, Malix?" After a moment's hesitation, Malix nodded weakly. Leon gently took Malix's injured arm. The students gasped and intensified their keening as Leon dunked the wound directly into the basin of water. Malix flinched at first contact, but then his expression changed from fear to surprise. The water around the wound turned slightly blue as it diluted the leaking fluids, But the reaction Leon had predicted was taking place. The enzymes were stabilizing in the aqueous environment. Leon smiled. See, the water is displacing the oxygen, preventing the catalytic breakdown of your tissues. The Zentari student stared in amazement as Melix's expression relaxed. The wound was still open, but the dangerous reaction had stopped. The leaked enzymes, now diluted in water, posed no further threat to Melix's tissues. It doesn't hurt anymore, Melix said with wonder. The burning sensation is gone. Dr. Alex moved closer, her professional curiosity overcoming her initial skepticism. Fascinating. The water is acting as a buffer solution, but this is only temporary, correct? Yes, Leon nodded. We need to close the wound properly, but first we need to neutralize all the exposed enzymes. Can you prepare a synthetic sealant compatible with Zentari biology? As Dr. Alex prepared the treatment, the Zentari students gathered closer, their distress turning to curiosity. Why are you smiling, Professor? Asked Xenix. Is Melix's condition amusing to you? Leon's smile faded, realizing how his expression might be misinterpreted across species. Not at all. I'm smiling because I'm relieved the treatment is working. In human culture, sometimes we smile when we're happy that someone is going to be okay. The explanation seemed to satisfy them, though Leon made a mental note to include more about human expressions in his next lecture on comparative biology. Dr. Alex returned with a gelatinous green substance. This is a synthetic protein matrix that should bind with Zentari tissue. It's what their medical professionals use for deep lacerations. With the wound still submerged, Leon gently cleaned away the diluted enzymes. Once the area was clear, he carefully lifted Melix's arm from the water, and Dr. Alex quickly applied the green gel. It immediately began to harden into a flexible seal. The pain is gone, Melix said with relief. But Professor, how did you know water would work? Everything we've learned about Zentari physiology suggests water should be harmful to us. Pure water can be irritating to your skin with prolonged exposure, Leon explained. But it's not immediately harmful in emergency situations. Your body's enzymes evolved to function in a low oxygen, low water environment. When exposed to air, they become hyperactive and potentially self-destructive. Water temporarily dilutes and stabilizes them. The students gathered around, their earlier panic now replaced with scientific curiosity, the natural state for most Zentari. But in your emergency protocols, Leon continued, looking at Dr. Alex, there should be a buffer solution specifically designed for Zentari wounds that works better than water. Do you have that on hand? Dr. Alex's skin flushed a deeper purple with embarrassment. We do, but it's stored in the xenobiology lab. When the emergency was called, we didn't have time to retrieve it. Leon nodded. I understand. But now that we know this works in an emergency, we should make sure the buffer solution is kept here in the medical bay as well. Melix was sitting up now, examining the sealed wound with fascination. This is an excellent practical lesson in comparative biology, Professor. The other students murmured in agreement, their earlier tears forgotten as they slipped back into academic mode. Speaking of practical lessons, Leon said, I think this might be a good opportunity to review emergency first aid procedures for different species. Would you all be interested in a special seminar on the topic? The students responded with enthusiastic agreement, their translators creating a cacophony of excited affirmations. Station Director Vrelex entered the medical bay, her tall, willowy form ducking slightly to clear the doorway. I was informed of the emergency. Is everything under control now? Yes, Director, Leon replied. Melix had a laboratory accident, but we've treated the wound and he's stable. Director Vrelex approached the examination table, her expression serious as she addressed the student. Melix, how are you feeling? Much better, Director, Melix replied. Professor Norwood used water to stop the enzyme reaction. It was unexpected, but effective. Director Vrelex turned to Leon. Quick thinking, Professor Norwood. Though I must admit, when I heard you had submerged a Zentari wound in water, I was concerned. It goes against conventional wisdom. Sometimes conventional wisdom needs to be examined more carefully, Leon replied. The Zentari have limited exposure to large bodies of water on their home world, so there are naturally some misconceptions about its effects. It's actually the perfect emergency treatment for exposed enzyme leakage. Director Vrelix nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps our emergency protocols need updating. Dr. Alex, would you work with Professor Norwood to revise our procedures for Zentari injuries? Of course, Director, Dr. Alex agreed. As the immediate crisis passed, Leon helped Melix off the examination table. The young Zentari would need rest, but the wound was properly sealed now and would heal without complications. Thank you, Professor, Melix said, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic overtone that indicated genuine Zentari gratitude. I was certain I would suffer significant tissue damage. You're welcome, Leon replied. And don't worry about missing tomorrow's class. Take a day to rest and recover. As the students began to file out of the medical bay, Trellis lingered behind. She approached Leon hesitantly. Professor, may I ask a personal question? She said quietly. Of course, Trellis. When you put Melix's arm in the water and smiled, was that... She seemed to struggle with the concept. Was that what humans call courage, to act confidently despite others' fears? Leon considered her question carefully. Cultural misunderstandings were common on the station, and he wanted to give her an accurate answer. Partially, he replied, but it was also knowledge and experience. I smiled because I was confident in my understanding of the science. I knew it would help him. Trellis's skin rippled slightly, the Zentari equivalent of contemplative nodding. I see. So knowledge itself can provide emotional comfort. That is, a comforting thought. After Trellis left, Leon helped Dr. Alex organize the medical bay and begin drafting revised emergency protocols. The incident had revealed a gap in their procedures that needed addressing. You know, Dr. Alex said as they worked, this could make an excellent case study for the Intergalactic Medical Journal. Water as emergency treatment for Zentari enzyme exposure. It challenges existing medical assumptions. I'd be happy to co-author, Leon replied. But first, let's make sure the proper buffer solution is available in all medical bays, and that all staff are trained on this procedure. By the time Leon returned to his quarters several hours later, the station had returned to its normal rhythms. The emergency had been handled, lessons had been learned, and tomorrow would bring new challenges in teaching xenobiology to a classroom full of curious alien students. The next morning, Leon arrived at his classroom to find it unusually quiet. Normally, his students would be engaged in lively discussions before class, their translator devices creating a symphony of overlapping conversations. Today, however, they sat in attentive silence, all eyes turning to him as he entered. Good morning, Leon said, setting his teaching materials on the desk. Today we'll be continuing our discussion on comparative circulatory systems. But before we begin, does anyone have questions about yesterday's incident? Every hand in the room raised simultaneously. Xenix spoke first. Professor, we have collectively researched human medical practices overnight, and we have questions about your water treatment technique. I'm happy to answer them, Leon replied, pleased by their scientific curiosity. In our research, continued Xenix, we discovered that humans use water for many healing purposes. You immerse yourselves in it for baths and swimming, and you even consume it in large quantities. Is this related to why you smiled when treating Melix? Does water cause humans to experience pleasure? Leon couldn't help but chuckle. That's an interesting connection you've made, but not exactly. Water is essential to human biology. We're composed of roughly 60% water. We need it to survive, yes, but my smile yesterday was simply relief that the treatment was working. Another student, Krellis, raised her hand. Professor, we've been discussing this extensively. On our world, showing exposed internal fluids is a sign of extreme vulnerability. When Melix was injured, we all experienced what you might call empathetic distress. But you remained calm and even smiled. Do humans not feel distress when seeing others injured? Leon realized he was facing a significant cultural misunderstanding. We absolutely feel distress when others are injured. But human medical professionals are trained to remain calm during emergencies. My smile wasn't because I was happy about the injury, but because I was happy the treatment was working and Melix would be okay. The classroom buzzed with the sound of translator devices struggling to convey nuanced emotional concepts. So, The smile was relief? Asked Trellis. Exactly, Leon confirmed. Humans often smile in many different emotional contexts. Happiness, relief, sometimes even when we're nervous or uncomfortable. This explanation seemed to fascinate the students even more, and several began taking notes. What about Melix? Leon asked, noticing the empty seat. Is he recovering well? Yes, Professor, Xenix replied. The medical staff checked his wound this morning and said the synthetic sealant has properly bonded with his tissues. He is resting as you advised. Good, Leon nodded. Now, let's continue with today's lesson. We were discussing the evolutionary adaptations of different circulatory systems. As Leon began his lecture, he noticed the students were more engaged than usual, frequently drawing connections between the academic material and yesterday's practical demonstration. What could have been simply a frightening incident had transformed into a powerful learning opportunity. After class, Director Vrelix requested Leon's presence in her office. When he arrived, he found not only the director, but also Dr. Alix and two members of the station's educational board, a Voxian and a Meridian, both species known for their contributions to intergalactic education standards. Professor Norwood, Director Vrelix began, we've been discussing yesterday's incident and your response. The board members happened to be visiting our station and expressed interest in your emergency treatment method. The Voxian board member, whose name was Jax Peltar, according to his identification badge, leaned forward. His scaled skin shimmered under the office lights. Professor, your quick thinking potentially saved that student from serious tissue damage. More importantly, you've identified a gap in our emergency medical protocols across multiple education stations. We'd like you to develop a comprehensive training program on cross-species emergency response. Leon was surprised by the request. I'd be honored, but I should mention that I'm not a medical doctor. My expertise is in comparative biology, which makes you ideally suited for this task, said the Meridian board member, Nira Solis. Her holographic form flickered slightly as she spoke. You understand the fundamental biological differences between species and can translate that into practical applications. You've already demonstrated this ability. Dr. Alix nodded in agreement. We have already begun revising our station protocols based on yesterday's incident. Having standardized emergency procedures across all educational exchange stations would be invaluable. We're not asking you to develop medical treatments, Director Vrelix clarified. Rather, we need someone who can create a framework for understanding cross-species emergency responses, identifying when standard procedures might be harmful and when unconventional approaches might be necessary. Leon considered the proposal. It was a significant responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity to improve safety standards across the educational exchange network. I'll do it, he agreed. But I'd like to involve my students in the research process. Yesterday's incident has already sparked their interest in comparative emergency medicine. It would be a valuable educational experience for them. The board members exchanged approving glances. An excellent suggestion, said Jax Peltar. Involving students in real-world applications of their studies enhances retention and promotes deeper understanding. Over the next few weeks, Leon's classroom became the center of an ambitious project. His Zentari students, led by a now fully recovered Melix, dove enthusiastically into researching emergency medical responses across different species. Melix had become something of a celebrity among the students, proudly showing the healing scar on his arm as evidence of his scientific contribution. The once frightening incident had become a source of pride. Professor, Melix said one day after class, I've been compiling data on Zentari physiological responses to various emergency treatments. I believe I've identified several other misconceptions in our current medical protocols. Leon examined Melix's research notes, impressed by the student's thoroughness. This is excellent work, Melix. Have you shared these findings with Dr. Elix? Yes. She's already incorporated some of my suggestions into the revised protocols. And, Melix paused, his skin flushing a slightly deeper blue, I've decided to pursue xenomedicine as my career path after completing my education here. That's wonderful news, Leon said sincerely. You'll make an excellent xenomedical practitioner. As the project progressed, word spread throughout the station about the innovative work happening in Leon's classroom. Students from other species began attending his lectures, eager to contribute their own biological knowledge to the growing database of cross-species emergency responses. 4 months after the incident, Leon and his students presented their findings to the Intergalactic Education Board. Their comprehensive guide to cross-species emergency medicine was approved for implementation across all educational exchange stations. "This is only the beginning," Leon told his students after receiving the news. "Medicine is constantly evolving, and what we know today may be revised tomorrow based on new discoveries." Trellis, who had become one of the project's most dedicated researchers, raised her hand. "Professor, there's something I still don't understand about human responses to medical emergencies." "What's that, Trellis?" "When you treated Melix, you acted with certainty, even though none of the medical staff were confident in your approach. How did you know it would work?" Leon considered the question carefully. "I didn't know with absolute certainty," he admitted. "I made an educated guess based on my understanding of Zentari biology and human medical principles. Sometimes in emergencies, you have to trust your knowledge and take calculated risks." The students murmured among themselves, their translators creating a gentle background hum. "But weren't you afraid?" pressed Trellis. "If you were wrong, Melix could have suffered worse damage." "Yes, I was afraid," Leon acknowledged. "Being brave doesn't mean not feeling fear. It means acting despite that fear when necessary." This concept seemed to resonate deeply with the students, many of whom came from cultures that valued different aspects of courage. On the 1-year anniversary of the incident, the station hosted a symposium on cross-species emergency medicine. Medical professionals and educators from across the galaxy attended, eager to learn about the protocols developed by Leon and his students. During the opening ceremony, Director Vrelek surprised Leon by announcing a new addition to the station, a dedicated training facility for cross-species emergency response, named the Norwood Melix Center for Xenomedicine. This center, Director Vrelek explained to the assembled crowd, represents our commitment to understanding and respecting the biological diversity of all sentient species. It stands as a testament to how a single incident, handled with knowledge and compassion, can lead to significant advancement. Melix, now in his final year of studies, stood proudly beside Leon during the dedication ceremony. His once serious wound was now just a faint mark, barely visible against his blue skin. "Professor," Melix said quietly as they toured the new facility, "do you remember when you put my arm in water and smiled?" "Of course," Leon replied. "I was certain you were making a terrible mistake," Melix admitted. "In our culture, exposing a wound to an unknown substance would be considered reckless. But now I understand you were applying knowledge across biological boundaries. That moment changed my perspective on education itself." Leon was touched by Melix's words. That's the greatest reward of teaching, seeing how knowledge can transform understanding. As they walked through the training center, Leon noticed something unusual. Along one wall was a large tank of clear water, with a plaque beside it. Curious, he approached and read the inscription. "In emergency situations, conventional wisdom must sometimes yield to cross-species knowledge. This water represents both the literal treatment that saved a student and the figurative dissolution of boundaries between different biological understandings." Leon smiled at the symbolic gesture. What had begun as a frightening emergency had evolved into something much more significant, a new approach to understanding the diverse biology of the galaxy's many sentient species. That evening, Leon sent a message to Earth, updating his former colleagues at the university about the new training center and the continuing success of the cross-species emergency medicine program. He attached images of the facility and the water tank memorial. The reply came several hours later. "Congratulations, Leon. What began as a simple educational exchange has become something truly groundbreaking. Your work is changing how we approach xenomedicine across the galaxy. We're all smiling with pride here." Leon read the message twice, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond any academic recognition he had previously received. He had come to the education exchange station to teach, but had ended up learning one of the most important lessons of his career, that sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come from the simplest actions, like dunking a wound in water and smiling with relief when it works. The next morning, Leon entered his classroom to find his students had prepared a surprise. On his desk sat a small, elegantly crafted model of a human hand and a Zentari arm, positioned above a pool of blue crystal that represented water. It was both a scientific model and a work of art, capturing the moment that had changed so many perspectives. "We wanted to thank you," Xenix explained as Leon examined the gift. "Not just for helping Melix that day, but for showing us that knowledge can cross the boundaries between worlds. And for teaching us," added Trellis, "that sometimes what seems frightening at first, like submerging a wound in water, can actually be exactly what's needed." Leon placed the model carefully on his desk, deeply moved by the gesture. "Thank you all. This will always remind me of the importance of what we do here, building bridges of understanding across different biologies and cultures." As his students took their seats, Leon began the day's lesson with renewed purpose. The incident that had once caused such distress had transformed into a foundation for growth, understanding, and advancement, proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from the most unexpected moments. And as he looked at his students' future scientists, doctors, and explorers who would carry this knowledge to the far corners of the galaxy, Leon knew that the simple action of dunking a wound in water and smiling with relief would ripple outward in ways he could never have anticipated, creating connections across species and saving lives for generations to come. In that moment, teaching had never felt more important or more rewarding. The universe was vast and filled with different forms of life, but understanding could flow between them as easily as water, if only we had the courage to trust in knowledge and reach across the boundaries that separate us.